you want to repeat the same behavior every day for 45 days, and you will build a connection that's strong enough for your electricity to flow. It will not be as strong as the pathway you myelinated when you were a child, but it will be, what I use in my visuals is, it will be like a dirt path through the jungle, which flows much more easily than having to hack through new jungle.
Welcome to the From Within podcast with Ben Osterveld.
Hey guys, Ben Osterveld here on the From Within podcast. I am super excited. I know I say that when I have guests, but this time I'm really excited. I've got Dr. Loretta Breuning with me. She is someone I ran into, as you know, I rather listen to things than read, but this time I was reading an article and it was all about brain chemistry. And man, I don't know how it is, but I found Loretta, with this lady has to be on my podcast. Honestly, I didn't even know she had a website or anything. I just reached out, says, I need to interview you. You got to be on the show. Found out that she's been on hundreds of podcasts, multiple books she's written. She's the real deal. So thank you so much, Loretta, for taking the time. I really am excited to chat with you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me and for that lovely introduction.
You know what? Why don't we just do this real quick? Let's get into who you are, and let's just introduce people. You know, a little bit of your backstory. The book that hooked me is Habits of a Happy Brain. But I know you've got other books. Why don't you do a little brag? Tell the world who you are, what you're up to right out of the gate, and then we'll get into some of that brain chemistry and how that all affects us and everything. That'd be great.
Well, I help people understand the brain that we've inherited from earlier animals. It's often called the limbic system, which is the little structures. People have heard things like the amygdala and the hippocampus. The parts aren't important. What's important is this cluster together that's in the core of our brain is almost exactly like animals. And it doesn't process words. It processes the chemicals that make us feel good and bad. And animals make decisions, social decisions all day, every day. They decide how to use their time and when to go ahead and when to pull back. And they make these decisions without the part of the brain that we use to talk to ourselves in words. So they're making these decisions with chemicals, and that's what we're doing. And then the words that we use to talk to ourselves is just another layer on top of that. And the two brains don't really understand each other. So that's my thing, is to help people do that. And the way I came to be doing this, I was a college professor for 25 years and a parent, and even had some other failed careers. And I got a pretty bad start in life. And so I always wanted to understand, just like you, like, how does the brain work? And everything I was being taught in academic psychology did not click for me, did not work for me. And so I just kept reading and studying. And then I discovered writing about the animal brain. And I was like, this is it. And it's pure biology. It's not any voodoo stuff. But it's biology that gets no attention today because it shows the darker side of animals, which is out of fashion.
Yeah, no doubt. The animals are people in most people's minds, right?
Better family than members. People.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's amazing. Let's talk about this. I will tell you, one time I had a health guy. He was actually on my podcast. He's a friend of mine. He's down in Texas, and he does a naturopath. He's actually a chiropractor, and he's got all these degrees and things. He's a super smart guy, but he's really leaned into natural health. And he did all this blood work on me one time, and he looks at it about, way different than just the average doctors, because the doctors look at it and they say, okay, you're within the safe range of all these different things, and his ranges are going to be different. And he told me, he goes, are you stressed out? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I really think that you have a lot of, is it cortisol? Mm-hmm. He says, yeah, I think you're pretty stressed out. You kind of went through this whole thing to me. And that was the first time I realized there's a lot more going on that we're not seeing in our lives. And it's very fascinating to me. And these chemicals are something, I think, growing up as a kid, I had this weird kind of a religious background where it was like, psychology wasn't the most popular thing, and I kind of had this crazy background, and antidepressants were just horribly bad, and all this brain and all this stuff. And so I'm not like that today, obviously, but growing up like that, it was almost demonized. Have you found that in your world, that there's other people that are still not excited about this topic, or is it pretty evolved now?
Well, when you say like demonized of antidepressants, I'm not promoting antidepressants. I'm not condemning them either. Yeah. I'm saying we should understand the nature of serotonin, the job that serotonin does in the animal world is the first thing. And the second thing is to find your power over your brain rather than think you bring it like to the shop to get fixed.
Very cool. So let's go through this. So there's the happy ones and the ones that, what do you call them? Bad ones? Or like, how do you explain, what did you explain it?
I call them threat chemicals because I always try to use the word that's closest to the animal experience.
Gotcha.
So okay, a threat. Cool. And in the animal world, a threat is the obvious predator, but also when you can't find food, that's a threat. So when you're hungry, your brain releases cortisol. By the way, when you were told that you had cortisol, I don't know, I guess you trusted this person, but it's possible. I don't like to diseaseify things. Yeah. I went to one of these people and they told me that my cortisol didn't have the right arc because you're supposed to start the day with a lot of cortisol and then it goes down. Yeah. And I did not have a lot in the morning. And I thought that was crazy because the average person jumps up with a burst, like with an alarm clock. So I don't do that. So I just ignore them. So you can ignore.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it was more like the introduction to the thought was what my reference point was. The introduction to the thought of it. And it wasn't like I didn't understand that under stress and pressure, this is happening. And so, but yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying. Let's go through the happy ones. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. Can you give us a breakdown? I know that this is like a second language to you. So I'd love to hear kind of for the people that don't know what it is, the way you describe it is so cool. I've seen it and heard it, and it's so simple and easy to understand. So yeah, let's start with dopamine. What is that all about?
Sure. Well, first, before getting into the individual ones, just that the happy chemical from the animal brain's perspective is this is good for you, go toward it. And the unhappy chemical is this is bad for you, pull back. So people want to think of some kind of philosophical happiness or higher value, but from the animal brain, this meets a need. So dopamine is the primary signal that you're about to meet a need. And you feel excited. So the simple example would be if you are on a camping trip and you don't have any water and you're looking for water and you see, oh, look, there's water in the distance. And then you're excited and you feel good before you get the water, as long as you keep getting closer to the water. So that's how it is with everything. Because our physical needs are met, then we look for other things to get excited because dopamine always focuses on the unmet need. So you get the excitement as long as you get closer to it. Then when you get it, the dopamine stops because it has already done its job. And then you have to see something new that meets an unmet need to get more dopamine excitement. And then you have to take more steps toward it. And you get that excitement as you approach.
I've been told that's really cool. I love how simple you make it. It's so easy to understand. I was told one time when I was, want to date my wife or I want to take her out on a date, is doing the same thing over and over again. And they say, if you want to have a dopamine shot, do something new with her. And it was something I've always remembered. Does that have any kind of weight to it? Is that real?
Yeah, absolutely. So memory and dopamine are linked. So all of these chemicals, the chemicals are the brain signal, this is important. Either it's important good or important bad. So whenever the chemicals are on, neurons connect, and that's how you remember, that's how an animal remembers how to meet its needs. So you were memorable to your wife because she was doing something different.
Interesting. That's really cool. Now let's go to serotonin. What does that do for us? So dopamine is about, like when you see something exciting and when it's going to meet your need, and serotonin, they almost feel all the same to me in some level, right? Like it's almost like they're I've heard them used in so many different ways. Like, what is serotonin for us?
Would you be willing to do oxytocin before that? You'll
Sure.
see
Yeah.
why in
Do
a second.
100%. Yeah.
Sure.
You
Okay.
you tell me. You tell
Sure.
me. So
So
yeah.
you'll see why in a second.
Yeah. Perfect.
So oxytocin is like the herd behavior of animals. So the mammals inherited their brain from reptiles and then added on. So reptiles don't have any social alliances. It's every reptile for themselves. But mammals, they seek safety in numbers. And oxytocin is the good feeling of social trust. And it's the good feeling that I can let down my guard. Like if an animal wants to eat, but there might be a predator, but when you're surrounded by others, you can let down your guard and eat. So it's still based on the individual's needs, but they want protection. And so they seek company. So we seek company, we seek social alliances, we seek trust, we seek someone who will be there for you. And the bigger the brain, like monkeys and apes, they actually invest effort in advanced building, strengthening of social alliances. So it's like grooming. I groom you, and then you will be there for me when I'm attacked by a predator. So it's all based on individual needs. You could say selfishness, but it strengthens alliances.
It's so fascinating. We've got 100 questions, and I want to, obviously for the sake of the show, keep moving, but I feel like is that like rubbing each other's back? Is it like community clubs? Is it networking? Like, is it all triggered? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to come back to the tribe mentality later. It's a big deal for me in my world and all that. But is that like human touch? Like what is happening there?
Yeah, so they all go, those are all different ways. But obviously, if someone trusts you, if someone touches you that you don't trust, then you're like, ew, what are you doing? Then you feel like manipulated or hostile. So touch and trust go together in the animal world. And the reason for that is if I let you groom my fur, you're close enough to kill me in an instant. So I have to trust you before I let you approach me. And the way I decide is with the oxytocin circuits I built from past experience. So each time I have that sense of trust, then neurons connect, and that wires me to turn on the oxytocin more easily in future experiences that are similar. So from an animal's perspective, it might be similar because of smell or because you look like me. But in the human world, it's more strategic. So you talked about networking, like you did me a favor. So now when I see you, that turns on my oxytocin. And now when you ask me for a favor, I want to do it for you.
Interesting. And what about authenticity in that? Like, you know what I mean? Like I really, really believe in, if I was going to do something thoughtful, if I feel like I'm trying to get something from you, Loretta, I would feel gross because I feel like I've been manipulated by people that want something from me. It's like, hey, I'll do, and the scratch your back, I scratch your back it to me makes me feel disgusted a little bit. Like that's my own thing. So when you do that, is like, so oxytocin, does it have a disclaimer? Does it authenticity have to be there or no?
Yes. And this is the thing. If these chemicals were designed to just flow all the time for no reason, it would get us into trouble. If you had, like people say, oh, oxytocin is so nice, they think we have it all, we should have it all the time. And I appreciate your depth because most of the superficial, like online stuff, they just think you should just get free happy chemicals all the time. But if I trusted everyone, that would be bad for me. So you make careful decisions about when to turn it on. So if you have had past experience with loss of authenticity or people manipulating you, then you're more careful about when you turn it on. The same with dopamine. If my dopamine flowed all the time for no reason, biologically, that's cocaine, you know.
Interesting.
But it would be like I would waste my energy on stupid things and then not have energy left for important things.
Very fascinating. Very fascinating. Yeah, that's really cool. And so is there a sense of, and just because I want to go a little bit deeper on oxytocin, I think it's really interesting. I run a something called Business from Within. It's a group of individuals. I literally mentor 12 to 14 individuals a year, and we go on retreats, and it's getting really, really cool because a lot of people are re-signing up, and they're going through this process, and it's really about getting yourself out of the way and building a business that pays for life. Now, the thing is, though, what I'm realizing is I'm really putting a tribe here together. Like it's legit, like we're like tight. And it's like this special place. And it makes me think, is that triggering on oxytocin? Is that?
Absolutely. It's social trust. And another example would be when a person goes to a sporting event or a concert, when you're with a large group of people, then you have this good feeling like this is my tribe. But you mentioned the word authenticity.
Yeah.
When you're at a sporting event and you're all cheering together, you know those people are not going to be there for you when you need them. So we all have that, like it feels good for a moment, but then when you go home, and this is also going home from a bar with just anyone, you get a lot of oxytocin at once, but then they're not there for you when you need them. So in the modern world, that's why I don't like it when people misinterpret, you know, and they say, get a puppy, you know, it's there for a reason. And the reason is your mammal brain says, I want someone to be there for me when I need it. But then you can't take it too far. A lot of people go too far with, my spouse should understand me every minute. I should be happy every minute. Otherwise, it's my spouse's fault. So you have to have realistic expectations of others, but also understand that healthy long-term alliances let you feel good more than just moments of connection.
I love that. It's like you got my back. I can bicker with you. I can fight sometimes. We have relationship, but at the end of the day, I know that I think that's what we're saying, right? We just know that there's certain people that just know they have their back, and that doesn't mean we're happy all the time.
Yeah, but then it's complicated because I have to say, like, if I have a deeper conversation with you, but the real people in my life, they don't want to talk to me about this stuff. So we really want both. We want the long-term relationship, but it's hard for humans to get along. So the people that you have your long-term relationship, you can't be 100% yourself every minute because we don't agree on everything. So then you find other moments of connection with people who understand you only on this one issue, and you get to be yourself on that one thing. So we want everything.
Yeah, that's, you know what, one thing, I went through a lot of, worked on my marriage a lot. And it was interesting because there was a moment where we're working with a friend of ours, Kelsey Grant. And at the end of the day, it's like, you can't get everything from one person. And we grew up that way, like, it's almost like we're together and we just feel like, well, you should be able to support me and you need to fill my needs. And I think it just came to a point, we came to a head. I'm like, I can't meet your needs. And I said, you're going to have to find someone else. And it doesn't mean cheating or divorce or anything bad. And it was like this beautiful evolution of our relationship. And I think that's what we're talking about, right?
Yes. I think the modern feminist movement has created unrealistic expectations for women. And it's always the man's fault for not understanding you. But believe me, when a group of women get together, we don't understand each other. It's just complaining is what bonds people, because predators is what bonds animals. Animals would rather go off their own way because it's easier to find food that hasn't been trampled by someone else's feet and whatever. Excrement, frankly, is so animals want to spread out, but then when they spread out, a predator kills them.
So
and natural selection built a brain that creates fear when you get distant. And that's why you go back to the group, because of that fear. But then when you go back to the group, the food has been trampled on by others. So then you want to get isolation, you want to get distance again.
Wow.
So it's that frustration back and forth that we all have. And when we know that that is natural and normal and the job our brain is designed to do, then we can stop blaming the people in our lives for like not meeting our needs.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing. What helped just even with the relationship is the fact that I just accepted my wife who she was, and she accepted who I was, and it was like we always say, like, how the hell the two opposite people work so good together, and we're kind of a story out there like that, and it didn't work for a long time until we really appreciated and accepted who we were. Not like, I am Ben, you need to listen to me, or like just really accept who they are. And I feel like that's that happy medium where it's like, you know, she's my tribe, but she doesn't get me sometimes. We're definitely not eye to eye.
And another interesting thing about this, after I gave up, stopped expecting my husband to understand me, I also stopped, like, I used to project unhappiness onto him. Like, I would think he must be unhappy because I would be happy if I were unhappy if I were in his situation. He should be
happy.
Yeah. And now I was like, wow, it's so liberating to not worry that he's unhappy. Why did I need to do that? He didn't want me to do it.
Amazing. There's so much there. Relationships is a huge topic, I love it so much. But let's move on to endorphin or in serotonin? What's
serotonin? Okay. So serotonin is competitiveness. And if I did that sooner, people would be upset because everybody's indoctrinated now with the idea that we should be tribal. And so they get upset when you say anything selfish. So I want to get the tribal one out of the way first.
Got you.
But people care about their status. It's so easy to see that, but it's so taboo that we see it in others and we don't want to see it in ourselves. So the nice, polite word for it is pride and confidence. But in the animal world, this is what got me doing this. I was shocked to read that animals obsess over their status ranking within their groups. And the bigger the animal's brain, the more they obsess over their status. And any energy that they have left over after finding food, they obsess in trying to work their way up the hierarchy. And this was explained to me in nature videos, just like a simple fact that everybody knows. And I was like, what? How come I spent like 30 years in academic psychology and nobody mentioned this, which made me really mad at academic psychology and really invested in learning more about it.
Amazing. I like, it's crazy. So status is a big topic, right? And we're taught generally that humility is good. It's almost on a pedestal. Pride. It's funny to have pride, but don't be prideful. Like, it's so confusing, right? Like, it's something we're trying to.
Well, so the thing is, now you can only be pride for your group, and you can only feel proud and strong if you dedicate it to the group. That's the reconciliation that humans have always made. And people talk the talk because acknowledging your own pride is so taboo. But the problem is that if you don't acknowledge it, then you resent other people. You think, oh, how come they get to be a big shot and I don't? Wow. And it's this resentment that I think is very bad for society and bad for the individual.
I love that. It's funny, serotonin has this like, oh, it's so great. But if you actually look at it, it's pretty like aggressive, isn't it? Like, it's serotonin. Oh, I've got great serotonin, or I've got more. Like, it sounds like it's not as pretty as people are making it out to. What do you think?
Thank you. There's like a lot in there. So first, none of them are as pretty as people make it out to, which is why I appreciate podcasts rather than like these stupid short things.
Clips,
but it's not aggression. So although if you've heard it's aggression, I'll give the one acceptance. You may have heard there's a thing called serotonin syndrome, and I think it may be associated with bodybuilders and also with like experimental situations where people are medicated or something.
Yeah.
But think about it in the animal world. If you are the alpha monkey, you're not violent against members of your troop, you're violent against threats. So you have superior capacity for strength, but instead of bullying, you inflict it on threats to the group, but you're not violent toward group mates. And that is only if they submit to you. So that's the whole thing. It's a dominant submission ritual. Anyone who submits to me, if I'm the alpha, then you submit to me, then I'm calm now. So I'm not going to be violent towards you. Wow. So it's often the weaker one that's violent because they can't get things other ways. But animals know when they're going to win. So they're only violent when they can win.
So like, it sounds like gangster. Like you got the mob, the top mob boss. As long as he's in charge, nicest guy ever. You want to threaten me? I'm going to kill you. Is that what we're talking about here?
That's how it is with animals. So that's why in the human world, the challenge is, well, you know, if someone's going to kill, if you say, I have this, I'm going to kill you. Well, that's why we need law enforcement, in my opinion, because the animal brain can go too far. Now, most people are trained in youth. So our neural pathways are built in youth, and you learn that if you're violent, then you will be socially ostracized. But if you don't learn that when you're young, like let's say when you're young, bullying works. You bully people and you get rewards, and you're around bullies, so your mirror neurons take it in. Then we need law enforcement to restrain the animal brain of people who don't learn to restrain it when they're young.
Interesting. Yeah, which is from trauma or whatever, bad examples or whatever. So I'm going to share something.
Or misplaced parental rewards.
Give me an example. So as an application, what does that mean?
So parents want to avoid conflict. So if one kid is beating, or teachers want to avoid conflict. So if one kid is beating on another, they may say, oh, let the kids work it out, because they don't want to be the one to lay down the law. So the kids work it out by one of them beats on the other consistently and gets rewards that way. And the mother possibly gives more attention or more pride to the bully, or the teacher gives more attention or more pride to the bully, and the child learns that bullying works.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. And it's a disaster. I just want to mention, so I'm Sicilian, and there's one of these mafia movies where they're going to do a hit, and before they do it, they go to his mother's house and she makes them a snack. Oh, she makes them meatballs so they don't have to go out and do the hit on an empty stomach. So this is my example of like
so
mothers.
You get meatballs before you go kill someone. Let's get you all full. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is mothers rewarding bad behavior.
Amazing. It just, it goes into my, like I had a pretty crazy story in the past. Like I've gone through like living on the streets and survival was a big thing. Trust was zero. And I still have a little of that shadow. Like it doesn't fully go away. Like I've definitely come a long ways in my life. But then I think about what you're talking about, serotonin. The way I used to be was I'd see the top dog in the business or the industry and I would dominate. And I'd find out that's the guy I got to beat, and I'd become number one. And it was unhealthy. It was so unhealthy. Like it would cost me relationships, mental health, but it was almost like this weird obsession to be number one. And so happiness was not in that, but I would make it because I'm an A-type personality. And it's almost like I would get close to these people and then kill them in a way. Like it's almost like, in a way, like it's like you're number one, that's the guy I need to beat. And it's just a very old programming. What's that all about with your filter, your
Yeah, it's great. First, I would say that there's a lot of, excuse me, a lot of cortisol in that. So the guy may have been right when he said that.
This is not necessarily me today. Just FYI, this is a lot. This is me worked out a lot of stuff. I don't do that anymore. But that's how I would position my life to find out how to be number one.
So when a little monkey wakes up in the morning and it has to find food to eat, and it looks around, and if it sees a banana near a bigger monkey, it's not going to go for that banana, because the bigger monkey will bite you if you grab the banana next to him. And a bite is cortisol. And every little monkey got bitten when they were young. And you see this if you watch nature videos. And so they look for a banana that's not near a bigger monkey. So our brain is constantly comparing ourselves to others. And if you're in the weaker position, it releases cortisol. And that's what you were doing, because you're seeing them as a threat. Now, every one of us is challenged to say, in the modern adult world, to say, well, they're really not a threat.
That's right.
And to rewire your circuits. But before you could do that, you have to become aware of your circuits.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what's hard to do. So you may have done that. Did you become aware of like, where did I first get that idea that I had to take out the big guy? Because probably you lived with a big guy and you couldn't do anything as long as they were there. That's right?
100%.
Yeah. And see, my training, my programming was exactly the opposite. So my mother was abusive, but she did it through weakness. She always represented herself as the suffering one. Yes. And she would scream all the time. And I got a fear of weakness of and people who are weak. And I want to do my own thing because I see like other people are weaker than me. So I'd rather do my own thing.
So fascinating. Hey, like it's just so fascinating. Just live and breathe this stuff. I just love it. Just the human is so fascinating to me. Why are we what we do? And I think that comes from, the backstory and stuff. But I think about that. Yeah, it's amazing. I definitely had a very dominant father, and very, very much couldn't do anything. And so, but what's weird is that even though I went number one, trying to be that dominant person, I hated the dominant person. It was like this self-hatred, schizophrenic, like it's almost like you get it, you beat them, you hate, but then when you see anyone like that, you hate them. It's like this weird mirroring that we're doing. And it's like the very person I'm trying to be, I also hate. So
what's interesting? We're all repeating our most painful moment in life. That's what we're doing because that's what wires the brain. So a simple example is if an animal, their most painful moment would be, let's say, a predator almost eats them and the predator's jaws go in, and that's pain, and pain is cortisol, and cortisol wires connections between everything happening in that moment. And that's what teaches the animal the smell, the sights, the location is what to avoid. So the simple example I use in all my books for humans, there was a story of a girl who was in a car accident, and she was in a coma for a week after this car accident. And when she woke up, she learned that all of her friends had died. And after that accident, every time she heard laughing, she had a panic attack. And the reason is because just the moment before the accident, she was laughing in the backseat of the car, and her brain did not remember the accident, but it connected the physical pain of the accident to laughter. So laughter was the trigger. It was a neural circuit, a pathway, and laughter was like the gateway to that pathway. So for you, somebody being like strong and confident like your father is the gateway to that pathway. For me, someone being victim-y is the gateway to that pathway. Once the pathway turns on, we're doing it to ourselves. And that's what we got to know.
Yeah, and that's and the way out is my favorite thing. Like I just love it so much. Like what I find, and I know we're probably going a little riffing here for a second, but I think it's really interesting. I get really excited about overcoming things. And at that moment where it's like, you have this, sometimes it's a moment where it's like this shift that happens and you're like, holy crap. It's almost like you leveled up in some level, or you're not so stuck anymore. And I know for the rest of our lives, we'll keep doing that. We're very complicated, layered people, but it's just so cool. Like what happens from a brain chemical where it's like, that no longer is a thing for me. Like, it's just like I find everything's a shadow. Like there's a memory of it, and you kind of maybe 1% shows up or 10% one day, but really it's over. But what happened there in the brain? Like what I always say, embrace your pain. I lean into it now. I self-accept now. I'm a big authenticity, be myself, big time. I find that's what's helping. But what's happening in the brain?
Sure. So first, this bad experience will always be a pathway, because when we're young, we have something called myelin. And you can think of myelin as like the paving on your pathways that make them super efficient highways rather than dirt trails. So we rely on our old pathways, just like in the animal world. This is where you find water. This is how you find food. So we're designed to be wired when we're young. And in the animal world, it doesn't change much. But in the human world, that early programming, it's not the whole story, but it's designed to be there forever. So we have to, what I think of, it's like, it's a highway system that you have, but you can build exits and you can build new highways. So it's new neural connections. And what I say at the end of all my books, you give your electricity a new place to flow. So you have to actually create a new pathway before you can stop zipping around in circles in the old pathway. Yeah. And how do you create the new pathway if the old pathway is so powerful? So first is that self-acceptance of understanding that this is what's happening. And then it's commitment to focus on the new pathway. Some people, like you're suggesting, build it in a moment, but often it takes a lot of experience and repetition to build it. If it builds in a moment, I
think the awareness pops. I think it's an awareness. It's almost like, oh my goodness, that's where I think maybe that's the start. Like that's where I feel like, holy crap. And you see it now. It's like, I've been blind and now I see, but then the behaviors, I think that's what we're saying, right?
Yeah, the example I use that is relevant to the people in your groups. If I had a circuit that I think many people do, that when I walk out of the room, that people are saying bad things about me and constantly feeling put down and criticized, and not knowing that that was a circuit in my brain. And if somebody tells me, oh, you're just creating that, then I don't believe them, because it feels very real. And people really have, said and done bad things to me. So what gives me the idea that it could be possible? So I heard that somebody said something good about me. And it's like, that was a happy chemical. The social acceptance is oxytocin. So that, because it's a real physical chemical, it started building a new pathway. It's like, oh, somebody could actually say something good about me when I'm not there. And now that has defined the pathway. And now it's my job to build it myself. But I can't become an addict of, now I desperately need people to say good things about me.
Which happens.
Exactly. Yeah. So we need to build a new oxytocin pathway, a new serotonin pathway, a new dopamine pathway, so that we're not slaves to our old pathway.
I love the idea that we just make more highways, and we just don't travel that one very much anymore. And sometimes you might take that path, but that's okay, because it's not the only path. I love that. Exactly. I love that framework. I'll tell you something. I've never shared this, because it's kind of inside, but I think you'll just really appreciate this. So my last retreat, I just ran a retreat with 17 people. And so what I thought about is I'm always into like, I think what I'm doing is helping people reprogram it in some sense, like in CritPass. And now that I'm hearing it from you, but I had everyone in a room and I brought out a weigh scale. And I said, okay, let's start our retreat this way. We're all going to weigh ourselves in front of ourselves. And so it was amazing. I said, what I want to do is observe all your reactions. I said, look at your reactions and listen to the dialogue in your head. And so I didn't have anyone actually see each other's weight, but I got a big whiteboard and everyone got a cardboard, and I said, write down the words that you're seeing and you're saying. And it was didn't matter the size. Everyone was negative, right? It was like not good enough, or even yuck, or even like, whoa, like so much. And I find those are patterns. I was like, okay, here's what we need to do. I said, I want you to reframe that in the way of like something believable, because personal growth is kind of a joke, to be honest. A lot of times it's like, let's look in the mirror and say we're pretty. Well, I don't feel pretty.
Yeah.
It's such a joke. It's just like people buy that stuff. I'd be doing my affirmations and I still feel ugly. Well, yeah, because you probably feel ugly. So I said, why don't we change the words to something believable that's positive? And it's like, could you move 1 inch toward it? And Loretta, it was so powerful. Like, it was so powerful. It was so cool. Is that reprogramming? What's going on in the brain? Like, I don't know what's going on. I just know that we have to face ourselves. That's kind of what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, when you're facing yourself, what you're doing biologically is recognizing that it's a pathway in your brain rather than a real live event in the outside world. Like, if I think everybody will hate me if my weight is a certain number, that's my thought. It's not a fact in the world that the world is actually hating me. But because we're so used to saying these things, thinking these things to ourselves, we don't realize that they're not real. But when you're in a group and you verbalize the thing that you're always saying to yourself, then you realize, oh, that's just something I've created. It's not a fact that you're all going to hate me because my weight is this number.
And when everyone else at the same time is going, you think that, oh my, and I think that's I see what you're saying.
What I'm interested in is whether anyone in the group would have been angry at you for this exercise. I guess that's the fear I always have of the victim person, because they say, how dare you shame me for my,
I think it's about, the people in the group know what they're getting themselves into when they meet with me. I'm very aware that, look, we're going to be challenging ourselves. Let's get ourselves out of our own way. I'm trying to really, that's been from a business standpoint, very, very important to set the expectation, because then you attract the right people. That's a business. I find my tribe. If you're not my tribe, we're probably going to have a hard time together. And so endorphin, do it really quickly on endorphin, and then I want to talk about victim. You've hit it a couple times. I think it's a tragedy in so many levels, victim mode and being stuck. And it's almost like when I deal with someone that's got the victim thing, they're very difficult to actually help. But I want to get there, but I don't want to leave one hanging, because there's a very important happy chemical, which is endorphins, right?
So endorphin is the same thing as opioid that we hear about now, or morphine or heroin. So the body makes it naturally when you're physically injured. So we are not designed to have it all the time. We're not designed to seek it. We only get it from real physical pain. So all these chemicals are evolved to promote survival. And it would not promote survival to give yourself pain to stimulate endorphin. So we're only designed to have it for emergency. So if you imagine a caveman breaks his leg, endorphin is released for 15 minutes that helps the caveman climb out of the hole and call for help. That's the job. And people who try to stimulate it by inflicting pain on themselves, it often has a bad outcome.
Really?
So everyone says, oh, it's exercise, it's exercise.
Wow.
But I know so many exercise addicts. So that's why I like to explain
that's
this
cool.
in
That's
such
really
a careful
cool.
way.
No, that's really interesting. I think about the guy that was stuck and they made a movie and he cut off his arm. Remember, he fell down he was in it, like, for anyone not watching, it's just like what the heck? It's like, so if endorphin had to be part of that, I'm guessing. Like, how the heck do you cut off your arm to get out? Is that what that chemical was used for there?
Yeah.
You just can't imagine it.
I won't sleep tonight. No, but
I'm so sorry.
That's mirror neurons, by the way. So the more realistic example is if you slip and fall and people come over to you and say, are you okay? And you get up and you say, yeah, I'm fine. But 15 minutes later, you realize that you're not fine and you're actually injured. So endorphin masks pain with a good feeling, a great feeling for 15 minutes. If you're in really real pain, you don't feel great. But if you're, see, this is the core of addiction, is the concept of distraction. So if I were being chased by a tiger, then that's a real threat. But if I'm imagining the tiger, then all I have to do is think about something else and the tiger goes away. So a person who thinks about food, or they go in a hot tub and feels the pain of the hot tub. I like that.
So do I.
Or a person who watches sports and feels the endorphin. Anything you do that distracts you from your self-created pain feels great. And relief is the highest good from your mammal brain's perspective. Relieving a threat is the top priority from your animal brain's point of view. So what are you doing? You want to repeat anything that relieved pain in your past. So everyone, think about it. What you're doing is just repeating behaviors that relieved pain in your past. That's what you're all doing.
Yeah, amazing.
And I'm doing
amazing. I think we all kind of still would do that. Like, it's probably quite normal, right? Whether it's eating. I find stress, if I get really crazy stressed, because I don't do any kind of drugs or anything like that, I'll go to like ice cream. I'll be like, you know, like, and I'm very conscious of it now. I'm like, yep, I know what, I'm just going to eat it. But yeah, that's really interesting. I spent a lot of time in addiction. So I spent 365 days in a rehab center.
And you know what, I'm sorry, when I finish writing a book, all I can think of is another book. That's all I can think about.
Interesting.
So when I was young, my only way to escape was with books, because I lived in a small home and my mother was screaming all the time and I couldn't. So the only way I could escape was to get my mind in a book.
Now it's video games, to be honest, for kids. Like that, what an escape. What an escape.
Yeah.
There's so much we can talk about. We may have to bring you on a couple times here, but let's go into this one. Like dealing with people, like I think of people specifically right now that are in a victim mode, and I find I can help most people get through most things. When I run into a victim person, it's a battle. Like, it's not even like usually I'm good at it, and then I run into it, I'm like, how the heck can I help this guy? So let's talk about victim. I know that's a topic. I don't even know how to start on it. It's a big one, but what's your thoughts on it from your perspective? What's happening to people? Why do people become that? What's happening in the brain?
So the brain always learns from rewards, and the biggest reward is relief of a threat. So imagine if you're a young person and you're feeling threatened, and when you take the victim position, it relieves the threat. So a simple example, you know, I said like two kids bullying each other. And if a kid says, he's always punching me, like maybe he changed the facts or something, but you know, he did this to me, and everybody believes him. Everybody's nice to him. He gets his way. So you learn that. So what is he seeking? You're seeking the oxytocin of the reward of the group. Now, group bonds are hard for everyone. It's a challenge for everyone. So we all look for fast, easy shortcuts to have a reliable group. So if I bond with other people who feel victimized by the same predator, then we all feel great. Oh, we're together, we're a herd, we support each other. But if those—
common enemy.
Yeah. If those groups spend all their time talking about the enemy, then they feel great. But the minute they stop talking about the enemy, they realize, you know, that they really don't agree on a lot, and they have a lot of conflict. So they have to constantly talk about the enemy to stick together. So that's one. Then the other thing about being the victim is moral superiority. And that serotonin is like, well, I may be a loser, but I'm morally superior to everyone who's successful.
Interesting. Wow.
Right?
Yeah, that's that's really interesting. Yeah. So
So
you're almost dominant
yes,
in a
by
passive
being,
way.
yes, exactly. It's a shortcut. Now, and you also get dopamine by doing that because um, dopamine is from getting something done. And if I don't find other ways to approach a reward, then accusing the moral failures of others or getting attention by being a victim and building my oxytocin herd is the way I get my dopamine rather than it's like getting other people to do things for me rather than getting a
Yeah.
banana is I get other people to get bananas
Interesting.
for me. And then
Wow.
finally it relieves cortisol, like I said, because instead of feeling threatened by the enemy, I focus on these other things and it relieves the threatened feeling.
I think about a little puppy. There's two dogs. One dog goes and attacking. The puppy lays on its back and just says, "Hey," and then it stops the threat. It's like, okay, fine. And then it's almost there's a victim. And then I think about other people. You know what I find? And I'd like to hear what you have to think about this, is that it almost feels like someone that's a victim collects people to defend them. And it's always that's why it's so hard to help them, because there's always someone that gets something out of defending the victim, which creates the codependency. A lot of times it's a father and kids. It's almost like, well, you know what, you didn't even love me today. And then everyone's like, yeah, you don't even know what he's gone through. And now you've got not the victim, now you've got someone else defending them. This is where it gets like only the victim and only that other person can fix that, I find, because one of them's got to stop because they're keeping it in. Is what's happening there, you think?
Yeah. Yeah. The enabler is getting something out of it. And it's tragic and it's so widespread now. And then the victim has to do worse and worse things to keep getting this. So what's happening, again, to take the simple animal perspective.
Love that.
When
Yeah.
you said the puppy goes on its back. So domestic animals don't have to find food. So they're a poor analogy because somebody's feeding them. So in the human world, if we act like, oh, I'm just a domestic animal, I'm a pet and you got to feed me. But that's not what our brain is designed for self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
So let's take a wolf. So two baby wolves fight each other. One is on its back. And what's going to happen to the one on its back? You know, I don't want to get into too much detail because there are different details of each animal, but basically the animal has to find its own food or starve to death. And if it's starving, it's not going to have the strength to compete for reproduction. And so the animal brain only gives you happy chemicals when you assert yourself successfully and actually meet your needs. You got to go out and find your own food. So this person who's playing the submissive, that you got to feed them. They're not doing the steps that it takes to meet their own needs. So in the animal world, they wouldn't survive. Their happy chemicals are not being stimulated. Now, people who are into this, I just quickly have to say, the currently fashionable thing is, well, wolves hunt in packs and they stick together, and we're not supposed to care about our own needs. We're only supposed to hunt in packs. But when you hunt in a pack, people, they filter out the bad side of animal behavior. So in the wolf world, only the alpha wolf gets to reproduce. And if any of the others reproduce, the male wolf bites the males, the female wolf bites the females to prevent them from reproducing. So you have to give up your whole life. That's what it means to be a pack, is you give up your whole life for the leader. I'm not signing up for that. That's what a lot of people are selling.
Interesting. There is so much here. I just love it so much. Just thinking about the listeners. I think when I heard you on a podcast talk about, let's talk about reprogramming, let's reconnect, do some changes. I'm thinking you said something about 45 days it takes to change. Like, how do we give something practical for people to work on?
So you want to repeat the same behavior every day for 45 days, and you will build a connection that's strong enough for your electricity to flow. it will not be as strong as the pathway you myelinated when you were a child, but it will be, what I use in my visuals is it will be like a dirt path through the jungle, which flows much more easily than having to hack through new jungle. So the first day that you try something new, it's like, excuse me, it's like hacking a new trail through the jungle. Imagine you have your machete, and it's so much work just to take one step.
It's like going to the gym for the first time or whatever.
Yeah. And it's so hard that you're so tempted to go back to the paved road. And so when you do this hacking, then you succeed today, but tomorrow when you go back to that path, it's almost as hard because the undergrowth has grown back. But if you hack the same trail every day, then a trail gets established, and it's never as paved highway as the paved highway, but a dirt trail is better than hacking that challenge.
Very interesting. And that's that. It's very interesting. Now, I think about something I discovered a while ago is the hypersensitive person. The hypersensitive person. And that was fascinating to me, that I've heard like 25% of society are hypersensitive. And that's just what I've heard. What's happening with these people? Like, is it a DNA thing? They're just born to have these big reactions, or like this super sensitive, like there's empaths, like that's common thing now. What's your thoughts around that?
It's a common thing now. In the interest of time, since our time is limited, I'll tell you in one word, I don't agree with it. But it is the accepted thing. So if you were like in academic psychology, I would not be allowed out in public, in academic psychology, because you're not allowed to agree with the dogma of the current day.
Yeah.
So in the current day, they would say it's this percent genes. So the answer to your group is whatever percent genes it is, you can't control your genes, but you can control your next step. And if you take that next step for 45 days, you'll build a new pathway. So that's one simple answer. But another simple answer is that there is grant money to study genes. So everybody who says it's genes gets public attention, support, they get grant money. And if you say it's not genes, then you're accused of stigmatizing people. And everybody who calls themselves an empath is playing that moral superiority game.
Interesting.
But everybody who, the degree to which our brains are wired from early experience is not studied. There's no grant money. It's not talked about. So nobody talks about it. And frankly, if you think you're an empath and then you see how, like, when I was a child in Sicilian culture, my mother wanted me to be her caretaker. And she was depressed and anxious. And I could have given up my whole life and spent my life taking care of her. Now, I chose not to do that because, frankly, it never worked. I tried, and she was never happy. But many people, like if I had a mother that said, "Oh, thank you so much. You're my savior. You're my hero," then I never would have had my own life. And I would look for other people to serve. And then I would pride myself on that because that's how I got wired. So that person doesn't like to think that they got wired that way. They want to think that they're somehow special and unique. But everyone listening, no matter what your thing is, you want to think it's special and unique. You don't like to think it's early wiring. It's uncomfortable, but you give away your power when you think that. So your power is in your next step, and Ben is helping you design the next step and have the courage to take it, right?
I love it. I just own it. Like I just that's one of the biggest things. You own your life. Like I've been dealt a bad set of cards from the beginning, and I'm coming on top, but that's because I literally just own everything. I don't think it's no one's fault. It's just, I just got to own it. Right. And then I got to figure it out and move forward. Like, and the whole answer is, oh, that's DNA. It's a hard one for me, or that's how I am. I think sometimes as a brain, and we want something to hold on to create some kind of conclusion that this is what's happening. and it's almost uncomfortable to not know. And I feel like that's where people get controlled quite a bit, because then they create a situation that makes sense to them. Like, yeah, I'll hold on to that. I'll hold on to that.
So my next book, I told you I dreamed about my next book. So I wrote a proposal for a book called It's Not My Fault.
I love it already.
Thank you. And I have gotten a bad reaction, I think, to this. So I'm going to send it to you, just the proposal. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love that. And I think the bad reaction is actually quite exciting for me, because what it does is, if you actually want to get your book promoted, if you have people that don't like it, it actually, like, it's actually quite exciting when I create contrast by my truth, though, not just to keep contrast just as a marketing BS. I'm saying, like, if you really believe something and someone doesn't, what I find is my tribe shows up. And it's almost like it creates some kind of really deep connection. We're like, no. I know Ben. I know his heart. I know what he's saying. It's almost like there's something that happens when enemies show up. And like, I think that's what you're talking about. It's like, people don't like that. Like, if someone was beating you up, I'd be like, hey, stop that. So it's just funny that we avoid enemies in some weird way. But honestly, when you want to promote what you're promoting and you want it to be successful, an enemy is actually quite good, or people that don't support you is actually really important.
Yeah, but if you get silence, so far that's what I've gotten, is silence.
Silence. Well, if you send me it, I'm not silent. So I like what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm going to send it to you.
You know what? I'm going to go a little bit. Is it okay if we go a little bit longer here?
Yes.
Okay, good. Mirroring. This is something I wanted to touch base on, because I love challenging these big statements in life, and we adopt beliefs. And one of them is, you become the person, the 5 people in your life. That's who you're going to become like. How much truth is this? I'm not on, I think we do mirror, but that saying, like, your 5 closest people, that's what I'm trying to say. Five closest people, I'll tell you who you're going to be. How much truth is that?
So first, there's the 5 closest people when you were young, that built those early myelinated pathways.
Wow.
That have a different power from the 5 people now. So that's part of it. You're always navigating between the old pathways and the current reality. And then I'm sure you remember this, where you had that moment when you were young that said, no way am I going to do that. So we've all had those early decisions, but part of that is because you had that one model when you were young, but then you found a different model when you were young who did something else, and you were like, okay, now I have an alternative. But then you may have modeled that alternative and absorbed their bad qualities too.
Yeah.
So if we think of everyone as a collection of strengths and weaknesses, then we can constantly make an effort consciously to mirror the strengths that we need, but not take in the whole person, so we don't mirror their weaknesses too. But often we use their weaknesses as an excuse. Like, everybody in my herd is morally superior, and if they have a few too many glasses of wine, well, it's not their fault, because it's so hard to be morally superior.
Yeah.
So it's your verbal brain, you're giving yourself the excuse, but you don't have to mirror them 100%. You can consciously choose what you mirror.
That's really interesting. I bet you that's debatable. You know what I mean? I bet you someone's going to love to debate that, because it's such a big belief, right? Subconsciously, we just become like everyone else. And yeah, it's really interesting. That's cool. I love the idea of that, to add the 5 most influential people in your life but what about the 5 at the beginning? I love that, because that's leaving permanent marks as well. Really, really cool. Really cool. So
I'm just thinking of if someone is having, let's use the example of the too many glasses of wine, and everyone in their group of friends is having too many glasses of wine, you can find someone that says, no, thanks, I don't need any wine. And you can mirror that moment. So you don't have to mirror their whole life. You might not like them, but in that moment when they're saying, no, thanks, I had enough, talk to them consciously, turn on your verbal brain and say, what were you thinking in that moment when you turned down the glass of wine? And that helps you mirror that moment.
It makes me think of growing up as a really insecure, just looking for love, and just not having that safe experience as a kid, and putting people on pedestals was something I had to really tear down that belief. I would look at these people because they'd have what I didn't have because I was so terrible, and I'd look at them. And one thing I've realized, I think that's kind of what we're seeing here, because I can choose to mirror, but I think everyone's messed up. And I think everyone's great. And I literally, me and you are at the same level. I don't care if you're president or if you're a street person. I really believe that with all my heart, we're humans and we're amazing beings, and we're all messed up and we're all great. And it's really, I don't like people putting me on a pedestal for that reason, because they're like, don't take all of me. Like, I love that. I love how this is kind of feathered into something that I believe as well. It's just like the pedestal thing. People put people on pedestals. I think that's when they take it all. That's almost like what's happening.
Yes, exactly. But also they're thinking, this is another thing that bothers me, is like, this person you put on a pedestal, but they have it easy sometimes, but I can't do what they do because other people who have something, their life is easier. So this is, I call it victim Olympics, and so you put them on the pedestal, but I wish I could do it as easily as you do. That's why I'm saying, well, learn how they're taking the step, break it down into small chunks, and learn the action step rather than the image.
It's once you're free of that, you look at it and go, how the heck could I do that? Like, it seems so crazy to me because what I know is that you've never seen me yell at my kids on Facebook. Like, sometimes I do. You've never seen me have a real bad day. And it's like, you have to, it's logic. Like, if I saw you in your worst case, I'd be like, holy crap. Everyone has that. And I think we lose track of that. Like, one guy says to me in one of my courses, like, you're like the social media guy. I'm like, how do you even know that? How do you even know what it's like they just create this thing. And I'm on a mission to just tear down that so people can just realize that you're not abnormally bad. Like, people build images actively.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Who people are, it's not that.
The urge to follow someone, to have someone to follow is very strong. The little story about Konrad Lorenz, he was the first person who studied the animal brain. And the little ducklings are, when they're born, they're going to imprint and follow the first thing they see moving. So they actually imprint on the scientist and follow him. So if you're following someone who's bad for you, the simple way to fix it is to follow someone else, and that you're a better someone to follow. So
yeah, and I feel like I'll just be that guy if I can, like, as much as I can, make sure people know that you're not perfect, but you can still make an impact in this world, and people can follow you and inspire people. And so I was asked a weird, funny question to just make it a little bit interesting. If you had to make a scratch and sniff sticker, what would be the picture and what would be the smell?
Ha ha ha, that's very good. So it's funny because I have my aromatherapy right here. I love it, and it's like, and I smell, it's like, oh my God, it's so good. So I do actually, I like flowers. So that sounds so boring though, but so no, here's the thing. I have this hazelnut bottle of aromatherapy, and it's like, oh my God, it's so good. But real hazelnuts don't smell that way, I don't think. But it's this bottle of hazelnut aromatherapy that I have next to me. But my vision is, so there's this rainforest. I love the rainforest. And I call it the rainforest from central casting, because real life rainforests don't have a lot of flowers. But there's one in Hawaii where they planted it. So when you go to a flower garden, there's not a rainforest, it's just a garden. But this is a rainforest, and then they planted the flowers into the garden. So that's my happy place.
So you would create a scratch and sniffer sticker that looks like the rainforest with the flowers in Hawaii. You'd scratch it and it would smell like hazelnut.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So if you were to redo your whole career and you couldn't do what you're doing now, what would you do?
Good question.
Because I
So
think we secretly have things in our heart.
yeah.
We're like, oh, I would do this.
Well, I have this thing now that I wish I could do. So when I moved from New York to California, although I had, beauteous visions of California, California is quite brown. Like it's brown. Probably a lot of Alberta is brown.
Yeah.
So I feel like the regreening, but not in a dogmatic sense, but there are people who are studying how to get things to grow in desertified land. And that's what I want to do.
Fascinating.
And you know how it relates? So one person that I've been studying, he said that you need a herd of animals to come and contribute their excrement. And that's what has kept the land going in the past. And originally, like 100 years ago, they decided that desertification was caused by animals and they protected the land from animals, but it got worse.
Killed the fertilizer. Yeah, it's very cool. I think we have so many layers of who we are. That's really exciting. That's really good. And what I always do at the end of my shows, because a lot of times people are probably gone by now. That's how podcasts work, right? I don't even know the rules. I think everyone listens right to the bitter end on mine. But I think I always say, let's turn the tables for a minute. I love learning. I like being challenged. I like pushing myself. I would like to leave it on the table here to say, ask me a question.
Oh, good.
Do a turnaround.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a question. So you use the word authenticity a lot, and I like that. And that's the conclusion of my book. I wrote a book called How I Escaped Political Correctness, and You Can Too. I'll send you that too.
Lovely.
And so I told you I want to write this book. It's not my fault. So I self-publish some of these books when I can't, and my political correctness book is self-published. But then I don't like to promote. So how can you get me started on promoting? When I self-publish, then I have to do more promoting, and I haven't been doing enough.
You know what? I feel like it's an inner game. I go right to inner game because there's this weird mystery of what is enough. So we have this unmeasurable thing of like promote what's enough. Like, is it bestseller? Is it like, we almost create this mystery of like, I'm not doing enough. And I call it a loop. It's this never ending feeling of like, so it's almost like, why did I write the book? What do I need it? Who do I want it to? And so something like there's promotion's fun. Like it's super fun. It's like playtime for me. And I think that's more of a creative thing. But first of all, a lot of people just need to realize what this expectation is, what I want from the book. What do I need it for? Like that's the biggest thing, because then you can promote it. So I think I would do something like, ideas are a dime a dozen, but for promotions, I'd probably do something crazy, like ship it in a box to all the right people out there, right? To create a shout out, to create everything like that. Like I'd have this, but I might make it a box, like it's not my fault box. And so I'd be shipping it to key people to do shout outs and different things, right? There's also PR companies, there's also social media, but it depends on what the goal is. And so I go back to it. I can give you 50 ideas on promotion, but what's the goal of the book? Like, what would be the, say in 5 to 10 years, you look back and say, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I wanted to happen. What is that?
Okay, so when people are being politically correct, that they understand that they're just following the herd to protect themselves, but it's not really good in the long run for themselves or the herd, and they realize that they have a choice. So I guess I hope to influence thinking, and really deep down inside is my children's thinking, my grown children. And then I also hope to get credit for it, because I keep saying, and I should get credit for that too.
So I feel like there's a dichotomy in us, especially business, marketing, humans, is I find there's a really cool balance of like, I would like to be really famous. I'd like to be successful. I'd like to have that. And I like to make influence. I've got this massive vision for myself, but I also have this balance that one is enough. And it's like, this one is enough.
Mm.
Like, did I, like if someone listens to this, Loretta, and just has this shift in their life because of you and what you do, and someone just had that shift, like you're going to change a generation that way. Like I think we have to kind of create that. So there's this balance of like mega promotion, but there's this place of like, we've won. And so that's where I feel
and to
like,
be happy with the one.
So I think, so promoting, there's just tons and tons of ways to do it. There's influencers, there's advertising, there's free webinars, and all of that stuff. But I think it's getting out of our own way a little bit. And if we believe it with conviction, it doesn't feel like promotion.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I really appreciate the question. I think actually a lot of people probably wonder the exact same thing. Is it the fact that you don't want to promote it, or do you what's the struggle in it?
Can I tell you offline?
100%. Yeah. That sounds good. We're I was going to go, we're 2 minutes past what I was thinking anyways. What we'll do is we will take it offline. I think it's been amazing having you share. I love this whole connection.
Well, you know what? Maybe I should just say in one sentence.
Sure.
I guess I'm afraid that if I say something more controversial in my self-published books, that I can kill the following I have for my published books. That's just so you know. I don't want to make people think it's something.
What is it? Yeah, no, that's cool. I think we'll definitely. I'd love to chat. That'd be great. I think that's really good. I think it's extremely normal. I think it's actually very. We could literally do a show on, building a brand. That we have one brand, but I don't want to say this because it's going to hurt the brand. It's actually very, very common. But I just want to say thank you for real. I think the way that you're bringing a very complicated, deep psychological topic using your study on mammals and animals, it just is so easy to understand ourselves through this animal kingdom. And I think it, like you said, animals are very, very easy for people to accept. So it's almost like when you start communicating with animals, you can get to a deeper psychological level. And I would love to sit and talk to you all day about this stuff.
Thank you.
It's super cool.
I'm happy to talk anytime.
Well, I'm a big fan. And why don't we close out our show that way? I'll stop the recording and we can say our goodbyes offline. So okay. Thank you very much, for real.
Thank you.